when the world is in crisis
การแก้ไขปัญหาโควิดถือเป็นวาระแห่งชาติ
and people are looking for hope and answers. Thai PBS World is there with you with the best minds of the day. Join us on Thai PBS World tonight, every weekdays at 7 p.m. Thai PBS World, we bring Thailand to the world.
สวัสดีค่ะ Very good evening and welcome to our 7 o'clock news Thai PBS World Tonight. I am Natha Gomonwadin.
Good evening, I'm Thep Chayong and hope that you all had a good weekend. All right, starting this week, we'll see more easing of the lockdown measures imposed since early March, right? And certainly we'll see more foreign visitors. These people will be exhibitors, technicians, people holding so-called Thailand elite cards, and people with medical appointments, and organizers of meetings and trade exhibitions. These people are among the limited groups of visitors that will be allowed into Thailand in the new phase of easing of the lockdown.
Yeah, that's part of stimulating local economy as well, even though Thailand cannot fully welcome foreign visitors yet at this point. And another good news is about no local transmission in Thailand today, and it has been like this for quite a while. And the 3 new imported cases today reported they are from state quarantine.
And tonight we'll start with this piece of news, which I believe that might have surprised many people, because all of a sudden we are told today that there are now more than 100 American military personnel in town to take part in a joint military exercise. Surprised because we have been told all along that the government would be very strict with foreign arrivals for health safety reasons. And of course, the public has never been told before until today that there would be a military exercise here in Thailand involving a large number of foreign soldiers. Dr. Thevisin Visunuyotin, spokesman of the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, confirmed during the daily news briefing today that more than 100 American soldiers arrived in Thailand today. He said 71 of them flew in from Guam and 32 from Japan. Another 7 more will arrive from Japan tomorrow. The spokesman said because of the pandemic, the Thai military had earlier postponed all other military exercises because of the COVID-19 situation. But this particular exercise is being allowed to go ahead. He did not provide any reasons. The American personnel who are here reportedly at the invitation of the Royal Thai Army flew into Thailand through Utapao Airport and were immediately transported to Bangkok, where they are being accommodated at hotels designated as alternative state quarantine facilities. The Army so far has not announced details of the joint exercise. The Defense Ministry said on Sunday it had decided to suspend all plans to bring Thai forces overseas for joint training with the US military. The decision was made after 9 Thai soldiers tested positive for coronavirus after returning from Hawaii. Spokesman Lieutenant General Kongcheep Tantawanit said the Defense Ministry will suspend all overseas training until after the COVID-19 situation improves.
And in the month of August, we are going to see more easing of the lockdown measures. Certain categories of foreigners will be allowed into country as part of the government's plan to jumpstart the economy. They include visitors with medical appointments, technicians, film production crews, and holders of Thailand elite cards. Dr. Thevisin said also to be allowed will be migrant workers from neighboring countries. He said the worker will be subject to strict health screening upon entering the country and put in a state quarantine for 14 days. The spokesman said further easing for other activities such as bull and cock fighting is also on the cards. Provincial governors have the authority to decide when venue for these activities can reopen. A full-scale reopening of all schools is also being discussed, he said. At present, most schools are still operating under strict public health measures, many with students attending classes on alternate days.
And next, on the progress in the hit and run case that happened in 2012, but has become a major news item in the past few weeks because of the decision by the public prosecutor not to charge the prime suspect in the case, and the person is now in self-exiled in somewhere in Europe, right? And today, a committee appointed by Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha to probe the hit and run incident involving an heir to the Red Bull business empire formally began its work under intense spotlight. Vichang Mahakun, chairman of the committee, said it will try to wrap up the inquiry as soon as possible. One major question that is being debated among legal experts and is most likely to be addressed by the Vichar committee is whether the case against Varayut Yuwithaya, the suspect who is still at large, can be revived. Legally speaking, once the public prosecutor decides to close a case, it cannot be revived unless there is enough new convincing evidence. Addressing the question today, Prime Minister Prayut said he has ordered authorities concerned to find out whether a revival of the case is legally possible. Vichar said legally, even the Prime Minister doesn't have the power to order the public prosecutor on how to handle legal cases. However, he said his committee can forward its findings and suggestions to the public prosecutors. The Vichar committee has been given 30 days to report its findings to the Prime Minister. The case has sparked a public outrage after the public prosecutor decided to drop all charges against Varayut, an heir to the Red Bull business empire, who was accused of speeding and driving recklessly on Sukhumvit Road on the morning of September the 3rd in 2012. His black Ferrari allegedly slammed into the rear of the motorcycle driven by a police sergeant major who was instantly killed. But citing two new witnesses who claimed that Varayut was not speeding at the time of the incident, and it was the police sergeant major who cut in front of his Ferrari, the prosecutor last month dropped all the charges against him. Police did not object to the decision. Besides the fact-finding panel appointed by the Prime Minister, the public prosecutor and the police are also in the process of pursuing separate investigation to find out why Varayut has been acquitted.
The case has drawn even more public attention after one of the two key witnesses in the hit-and-run incident died in what police described as a road accident in Chiang Mai last week, but only hours before his body was to be cremated in his hometown in Chiang Rai. Prime Minister Prayut ordered it to be impounded for an autopsy. The witness, Charuchat Mathong, died in a motorcycle crash in Chiang Mai last week, according to the police. An account given by Charuchat was considered to be instrumental in prompting the public prosecutor to drop all charges against Varayut. Charuchat and a retired Air Force officer were the two new witnesses cited by police in their report about the hit-and-run case. Both testified that Varayut was not speeding when his Ferrari slammed into the rear of the motorcycle driven by Police Sergeant Major Vishian. They also insisted that they saw the traffic policeman's motorcycle cut in front of Varayut's vehicle. The two came forward to present themselves as witnesses in the case only 2 years ago, almost 6 years after the incident. Police reported that Charuchat died instantly after his motorcycle crashed into another motorcycle on a road in the municipality of Chiang Mai last Thursday. The driver of the other motorcycle, Somchai Tavino, was injured. Somchai initially claimed he did not know Charuchat, but later admitted that they had met at a food shop that night, but were drinking at separate tables. However, he said they left together and were on their way to look for another drinking spot when the accident happened.
The incident, of course, has added new mystery into the whole case. And the Prime Minister's order for Jalucha's body to be impounded came amid widespread suspicions that there was foul play behind his death. It also came as a shock to the House Committee on Laws, Justice and Human Rights, which had requested Jalucha to testify this week. The House Committee is in the process of conducting an inquiry into the hit and run scandal. Prime Minister Prayut said today that he ordered the autopsy because he wanted to clear all doubts surrounding the circumstances of the accident. He said he had instructed police to negotiate with Jalucha's family, who subsequently consented to have the cremation of his body postponed pending an autopsy. And meanwhile, the Office of the Attorney General will tomorrow make public the findings of its inquiry into the case. Prayut Pechkun, the deputy spokesman of the Office of the Attorney General, said the inquiry centers on the question why the public prosecutor decided to drop all the charges against Warayut. The public prosecutor has been under fire for allowing Warayut to go scot-free in the case.
And regarding Tourism Authority in Thailand, Kuntepchai, the Tourism Authority of Thailand, or TAT, raised concern that this year the income from tourism industry will be dramatically less than last year because of COVID-19, and they are trying to mobilize the plan to opening up the country, especially for foreign visitors. The Tourism Authority in Thailand still feel a strong impact from COVID-19, and TAT says that if the country remains closed in the last quarter of the year, the number of foreign tourists will dramatically shrink to 7 million for 2020. TAT Deputy Governor for Tourism Products and Services, Thapani Kiatphaiboon, said while domestic tourism has started to rebound, most businesses are still feeling the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. In the first 6 months of this year, the number of foreign tourists stood at 6.69 million, a contraction of 66% compared with 2019. Right now, hope is on Thai tourists with a number of 54.5 million. Tourism chief expects that entry for foreign travelers can happen in October this year with the direct flights to Phuket, which will be the first spot for foreign tourists. Director General of the Department of Health, Panpimon Vipulakon, said Phuket is a closed area where it is easier to manage pandemic control efforts. The Urban Design and Development Center and Center of Excellence in Urban Strategies recently also proposed a project to revive tourist cities, using Phuket as a case study to design a tourism ecosystem that suits public health measures. The UDDC CEUS seeks to turn Phuket into a safe destination for travel by making the island an isolated community to reassure visitors of its virus-free status during their stay. So foreigners can have something to look forward to coming to Thailand,
Right.
Especially Phuket will be the first focus.
Now we have talked to the tourism minister, and he still insists on implementing this so-called travel bubble arrangement with some of the countries that have proven successful in dealing with the pandemic. And of course, besides Phuket, he sees Surat Thani, especially Koh Samui and Koh Phangan and Krabi as the potential destinations for tourists under this travel bubble plan. But of course, the government needs to see the results of this relaxing of the lockdown starting this month, when a limited number of foreign tourists will be allowed into the country. I mean, they are not actually tourists, but they are visitors, those with medical appointments, and those who hold Thailand elite cards, right? And then those who are here for film production and exhibitors, trade organizers. So these group of people will be sort of something to prove that everything is okay. And of course, the government hopes that nothing would go wrong. Otherwise, their plan for a travel bubble arrangement would certainly be affected. Yeah.
Of course, obviously, it's still lesson learned from Rayong case, the Egyptian soldier case that make the whole country very much remain vigilant and have to keep our guard up. And even though the plan by the government to easing the lockdown for foreigners has to happen before, but it has to go under so much revision because of the Rayong case. And the whole situation of the world doesn't help at all with the lockdown and the easing of restriction. Especially right now, spotlight is in Australia, and Kun Nat Bunak has more story for us. So what really happening in Victoria, in Australia?
Yesterday, they declared a state of disaster across the state of Victoria after it has reported hundreds and hundreds of new COVID-19 cases for a couple of weeks now. And as of today, the state of Victoria has recorded around 400 new cases and 13 new deaths. So the state premier has decided to come up with new lockdown measures, including a nighttime curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. for the next 6 weeks. And this nighttime curfew is something that has never done before in Melbourne and in other suburbs across the state of Victoria. And therefore, because the night curfew has been imposed, you'll see the streets right here, they're all empty. And for example, another place I would like to show you is Flinders Street Station. As you're seeing right here, usually Flinders Street Station is a very bustling area because people are taking trains and traveling to other suburbs. And because of the night curfew, no trains are operating at all. So that is to keep people at home during this time.
It's like ghost town in Melbourne, but of course other cities in the world must have been the same as well. So what are the new restrictions imposed in Victoria and Melbourne?
So basically it's one of the highlights of the restrictions is the nighttime curfew, which starts from 8 p.m. until 5 a.m. in the morning. And unless you're going for work, like for essential work, medical care or caregiving, then you might get the exemption of coming out during that curfew. But other than that, you during that time you have to stay at home. So no shops are operating and people have to keep themselves at home here. And another highlight is that Melbourne residents will only be allowed to shop and exercise within 5 kilometers of their home. Unless you're going to exercise outside of your home, it will only be allowed for 1 hour at a time. And in case you're not sure with the 5 kilometer, I would like to show you an interactive map which can give you a guide on how far you can go from your house. So this is an interactive map from the age here. So let's say I live in the suburb of Camberwell. So Camberwell, and if you type that suburb in the map, they will show you directly how far can you go. So let's say I'm at Camberwell. The furthest I can go would be around Box Hill South, Baldwin, Hawthorne, Malvern East, Ashwood, and that would be it. I cannot. So if I want to go to Richmond, there's no way I can go because it's beyond the 5 kilometer limit. Or let's look at another city like Hawthorne. Hawthorne is also in Melbourne as well. But so the names I've been mentioning here, these are the suburbs across Melbourne. And if I'm in Hawthorne, the furthest I could go would be around Collingwood, East Melbourne, South Yarra, Windsor, Glen Iris, Camberwell, Canterbury, and Baldwin. And this would be a useful guide for you. So if I go beyond the 5 kilometer limit, then you cannot go further than that. So that would be a guide for you. So to tell you where can I go within that 5 kilometer radius here.
So it must be quite unusual for Australians to really adjust, and they cannot go further than 5 kilometers.
Yes, the 5 kilometer radius here can be a bit of a hassle, but lucky enough, if
you live in an area where you're close to places like where you can buy groceries or do takeaway, then that 5-kilometer wouldn't be much of a problem.
So how's life under lockdown right now?
So I had a chance to chat with a couple of my friends who are still in Melbourne. Most of them right now are working from home until further notice. Some of them have worked from home since the first lockdown back in March. And one of my friends actually lived close to where they can do grocery shopping and takeaway because it's within the 5-kilometer radius. So their lives have not really been affected too much. Another friend of mine works in childcare and they're still waiting for confirmation whether they can still operate, as some of the parents, mostly are essential workers, still need to leave their children in daycare. However, the guidelines have already said that childcare must be closed except for vulnerable children, and children of essential workers would be kind of exempted from this one, but we have to wait for another confirmation and more details on this. And on the other side of it, although there are a lot of restrictions put in place, their day-to-day lives are not really that different from the first lockdown. But what can be frustrating for most of my friends is that they can't meet up or see people because they all had to stay in their homes or within the 5-kilometer radius. But from what I've talked to is that many people seem to agree with the restrictions that are in place because it's for the safety and to contain the virus.
So not much socializing at the moment.
Definitely.
Just only among family members.
Sort of, but
Yeah.
some people chose not even to meet up with family members because social distancing has to be in place here. So sometimes it's better to prevent themselves and protect themselves instead of like meeting or mingling with people, because in some countries mingling has caused a lot of new infections as well.
And do they have problem with wearing masks?
Not really. It's mandatory already in Melbourne and in many suburbs across Melbourne and regional Victoria. So when it's mandatory, then it's a must
Yeah.
to wear a mask.
Okay, and what about other stories?
And just so you know, these are the stories we've also been following today.
Thailand reported 3 new imported cases of COVID-19 today. All of them are now in state quarantine. The new cases brought a total number of infections to 3,320, with no new recoveries nor fatalities. Tropical depression Silaku is weakening to a low-pressure system, but will still bring heavy rain to 44 provinces in Thailand until Tuesday. The Meteorological Department warned people in the northern, northeastern, eastern, central, and southern regions to brace for heavy to very heavy rain and possible flash flooding in areas close to mountains. 2 survivors of the capsized ferry around Koh Samui have been rescued, while the body of the vessel's skipper was also recovered. The ferry was chartered to carry garbage from Koh Samui to Donsak district of Surat Thani for disposal. The search for the remaining 4 missing people is still ongoing. The number of foreign tourists will dramatically decrease to 7 million from its initial target of 9 million in 2020 if the country remains closed in the last quarter. The Tourism Authority of Thailand also forecast this year's tourism revenue at 1.23 trillion baht against 1.93 trillion baht in 2019.
The prosecutor decision not to charge against boss Awarayut Yu Withaya in hit-and-run case has raised so many criticism and questions regarding the work by justice and police, and there's so much calling for justice reform in Thailand. And what would be the next stage after there is 4 committees working on examining these cases? Right now we have Associate Professor Police Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Krishnapong Putrakul, Assistant to the President at Rangsit University, joining us live in the studio. Swadee ka. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you.
So how do you hear or how do you see the calling for justice reform and police reform in this case?
I think for me personally, like other people, we hear a lot about justice reform in Thailand, but we still talk about this at the moment. And for this case, hit and run. And in my opinion, I don't think we can see justice reform over the next few years.
No hope at all.
We can say that. Yep.
I see. You know, as an expert in criminology and justice, were you surprised or shocked by the decision of the public prosecutor not to charge Kun Varajut?
Yes, I think it shocked me as well, like other Thai people, because he fled away from the scene, maybe 7 or 8 years, right? But just last week, the spokesperson from Royal Thai Police spoke to the public. The public prosecutor adopted this case, and the Royal Thai Police agree with this. Yes. Why? That is a big question. Why? Actually, I think the Royal Thai Police, like the National Police Commissioner, has absolute authority. Disagree with public prosecutor decision. However, I can say we don't exactly know what happened behind the scene.
Yeah, but if you try to walk in the shoes of the police and the public prosecutors and try to understand the reasoning behind the decision, is there something that you think that you can talk about? Is there something that you feel, oh, okay, this is a good enough justification for not pursuing the case?
Actually, like the Office of Attorney General claim, like there have 2 new eyewitnesses and also 1 physics expert from another university just confirm the speed, like a new testimony. Maybe allow the speed would be allowed less than 80 kilometers per hour. On the other hand, at the beginning of this case, 1 physics expert from Chulalongkorn University gave testimony to the police officer. The speed would be allowed 177 kilometers.
Big difference.
Yes,
A big
100
difference between 70 kilometers an hour and 170.
Of course,
kilometers an
obviously,
hour.
yes. And all of these would be key evidences. That's why the public prosecutor just stopped this case.
And it seems right now they are like calling for revival of the cases. How do you think it would be probable?
I think it would be like that, but I think we still have some difficulty in criminal justice system. I can give 1 concrete example. According to the research done by 1 researcher in foreign country, it showed that there have a connection between the rich business guy, senior officer, and politician in Thailand. All of these key factors affected in inequality of the criminal justice system. Yes. So that is why sometimes we can see the rich have the power in criminal justice system.
Yeah, so that raised the questions of impunity on the rich in Thailand.
Yes, someone said it shows Thailand's culture of impunity.
And that's why this phrase, prisons are only for the poor, has been so popular in the past few weeks.
Yes, that's why we have to discuss about this again and again.
So let's come back to these 2 key witnesses, one of whom has just died, right?
Yes.
In an accident in Chiang Mai. So the testimonies given by these 2 key witnesses were crucial in making the public prosecutors not to charge Kun Varajut, right? But is it something usual or unusual that someone comes forward as a witness 8 years, 6 years, or 8 years after what accident. In this case, it's almost 6 years after the accident, right? So in criminology, is it something that unusual or something that acceptable?
I think it's not common for criminal case like this. Why new witnesses just appear after 6 or 7 years ago. Actually, they would go to the police station and tell the police what happened.
Yeah, soon after what happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. But however, they just show themselves after 6 or 7 years ago. Again, it's uncommon.
It's even more controversial when one key witnesses just died so suddenly last
Yes,
week.
it shocked me like other people too. Why he just died before he has to give us some testimony to maybe the House of Committee. It's quite strange. However, I think Prime Minister just ordered to local police station there just investigate this case seriously. We will see what happens next.
So there are now some parallel investigations and inquiries into why the case was stopped. So do you personally expect any positive results from these inquiries or investigations? Anything concrete would come out of this and clear our doubts that are still in public's mind?
So you mean the for hit and run case?
Yeah, hit and run case, yeah.
Actually, as we know, the government just set up like an independent committee headed by Professor Visha Mahakun to look at this case. And also, the Royal Thai Police appointed some senior officer to look into this case again. And like the Office of Attorney General, they set up the committee too.
Now at least three investigations into the case now.
Yes.
So do you expect any positive results from these?
As I heard a little bit investigation from some senior officer last weekend, they said like they just confirm hit and run case would be dropped. Yes. And however, I'm looking forward for the result of the committee headed by Professor Visha Mahakun.
Yes. So that's the only inquiry committee that we can really pin our hope on, right?
I think Thai people in general is looking forward for the outcome of the investigation too.
Even though you say that we do not have much hope for justice reform or police reform because we have been calling for this for quite a while, but what can we learn from hit and run case?
Of course, firstly, I think it showed what this guy, boss or Rayut, why he has a very wrong authority has opportunity to run away from the scene, maybe 5 or 6 years. What happened with criminal justice process? Actually, the police should pursue him. Yes, they did immediately. And after that, it takes much time. Maybe the police spent 5 years for asking the court to issue the arrest warrant. And that's why he could run away from Thailand. He could fly to the UK and other countries. Secondly, the lesson needs to be learned, not only for the officer in criminal justice system, but for the other officer in government agency. They should do on the basis of public interest, not for their own benefit. Otherwise, it will put pressure, very much pressure on the government, like this case. And also it sparked public outrage at the end. And I think for this case, it seemed like it would call more and more people on the streets just to demand for justice.
No, in the best case scenario, what do you think the result of the inquiry by Kun Vicha Mahakun's committee should be?
Actually, the Prime Minister just give the authority to Professor Vicha just to look into this case carefully again. But at the end, the decision will be made by the government, not by Professor Vicha Mahakun. So it seems like just academic result. Yes. So in other words, Professor Vicha Mahakun does not have the authority, the power, just to punish bad officer or bad applicants. Yes.
It's more of a fact-finding mission than real inquiry into finding fault with people, right?
Yes, yes, that's right.
It's quite unusually very quiet that the Thai public or even Thai media member do not really know the case until CNN has reported this case about 2 weeks ago. Why do you think it has been very, very quiet?
Actually, it's a good question. It seems to me, I think, what does it mean for quiet? So if we are talking about this case, yes, it seems to be very quiet. So it means some senior officer, not only the Office of Attorney General or the Thai Police, try to do something under the carpet. Who knows, yeah? However, now it's not quiet anymore.
But how they should be careful in terms of public backlash against this prosecution and police forces to have kept it so low profile?
It's hard to say. Yes, if they think this case should be put under the carpet, that's it. But the public in general still interested in this case and follow up this case for many, many years. Not only the public, people in Thailand, but I think people in other countries too, like Red Bull is energy drink.
Yeah.
It's worldwide, right?
Now, if this high-profile case can be swept under the carpet, as you just mentioned, it only means that other incidents involving less prominent figures must have been swept even more under the carpet.
Yes. I think it's hard to say about the decision. Yes. Because so you mean the public prosecutor made the decision?
Yeah.
And it's hard to judge the decision why they made like this. In my opinion, we need to have the independent committee to look at the officer decision in some interesting cases like this.
And who should set up that independent committee?
Of course, the
Prime Minister.
government. Yep. Maybe the independent committee should be composed of the group from different people, like business sector, maybe local authorities, or retired senior officers, or something like this, just to look in some interesting cases when requested.
Yeah. Now, if this committee is able eventually to point out the flaws or the people that could have been held responsible for the wrongdoings in the case, do you think at the end of the day, there is a possibility of the case being revived? Legally speaking, a lot of people believe that since the public prosecutor has closed the case, then it's over now, so nobody can have it revived.
I think the point is we should give them the authority, the power. Maybe call some key evidences to be revised again, or have the authority to call some officer to give some testimony by law.
This case has drawn so much criticism from the Thai public, And from criminology perspective, what could lead to change in terms of the whole process?
Firstly, public prosecutor decision should be inspected by the public. Like I mentioned earlier, it should have an independent committee, independent body when requested. Yes. Secondly, the lesson need to be learned for not only the criminal justice officer, but also for other government agency. Thirdly, public should pay more attention, not only the justice, but the equal right between the rich and the poor. And at the end, we expect this problem, the case like this, should be less and less in Thailand.
Yeah, I agree with you on the point of the public needing to pay more attention to this kind of cases, because I believe that one major reason why the whole case is being sort of revived right now is because of the pressure from the public, thanks to social media especially, right? So you would encourage people to sort of to keep an eye on in the future the criminal cases.
For transparency, yes, and for inspection, not only for our generation, but we just to improve, just to do good thing for the next generation, for better society.
So overall, it's something to do with individual officials who are responsible for the case or the whole system happening in Thailand.
It's a very good question. Actually, I don't want to complain the officer, but I would like to complain the system. Why the police would not have why the loyal Thai police can have the absolute authority to make the decision without any interference. You see what I mean? Yeah. Actually, like I said in this program earlier last time, actually the National Police Commissioner is under Prime Minister office. So it means politicians can put pressure on the police force by law. So it means we need to discuss seriously about Police Act 2004 just to amend this problem, this article.
This is another very, very big issue, reforming the police, right?
It's still.
And the drafting is still ongoing. The drafting of police reform.
Yes, ongoing.
Yeah, so we should really focus on 2004.
Yep. Actually, I think the Police Act 2004 in some article should be amended. Like I said, Prime Minister should not have absolute authority to appoint or dismiss the National Police Commissioner. Otherwise, when the Prime Minister command to the National Police Commissioner, he has to follow what the Prime Minister requested or demanded.
What's the damage that has already occurred to Thailand in this case?
Hit and run case. So I think it shows unfair justice system in Thailand. Secondly, it shows the gap between the rich and the poor lead to a problem between two groups.
Certainly, this is a major issue that the government, especially the Prime Minister, need to address. And using this case as a good example to pursue reforms of the justice system.
Hopefully.
So that's the hit and run case, which has been under criticism and raised so much concern on justice reform and police reform in Thailand. And who knows what will be the next step from this point, especially the pressure on the government, on the Prime Minister, even though there are 4 committees have been set up to examine the hit and run case. So we shall see how the public will stay tuned with the case. So thank you very much, Ajahn, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
And that's all from Thai PBS World tonight. Thank you very much for watching. you.